you're speaking, if you would mute yourself, then we'll not have any distractions from external noises. And welcome everybody to this evening's Dismantling Racism Together meeting. Appreciate your being with us and look forward to the presentation that we're about to have. Many of us know Eve Faulkes. She has been with Dismantling Racism Together from its founding, living here in Morgantown. And I'm sure many of you know that she's a professor emeritus of West Virginia University. She was in graphics design. She has a master's of fine arts from the Rhode Island School of Design and has taught at West Virginia University since 1979. What you may not know, and to me is an awesome expression of her commitment to social justice, she created a Justice Through Design endowment to provide scholarships for underrepresented students majoring in graphic design. So Eve, thank you for that into the future and how it empowers students. And now I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're looking forward to hearing how you have been about civil rights.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share here. So is that, everyone can see that?
Yes.
Okay. I think maybe there were only about 2 of you that I didn't recognize, and a lot of you may already be familiar with this project. It was shown in Morgantown at the library for all of July, and been kind of on the road ever since. So the exhibit and the graphic novel, but you might not know about how much fun I have had on it. And that's kind of what I'd like to do with this presentation, is just show you like why we did it and how much fun it's been, and we'll go from there. So it'll change slides now. Come on. Huh. All right, okay, I found a new way to do it. At the white area at the bottom, you see West Side Together, and that's because I grabbed some things from that lecture that I gave them just a week or so ago. And when I was teaching, we pride ourselves in graphic design these days of being really good listeners and being humble. And one way we want to start a project is to sit with not only the client, but the client's clients, meaning their people they're trying to reach, and figure out how we might pose a question that we can answer together. And so this question is what I thought of when I was trying to work on this project, is how might we help each other understand how important community engagement is in preparing for this election season? And I didn't read it as a question, but there we go. And my answer to that was to help educate people, both young and older people who didn't pay attention in their civics class, just what was going on with this whole anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. What were civil rights rather. And so I devised these categories of things that I thought people needed to learn about. And the difference between human rights and civil rights was one that I thought people might need to know about. And human rights, we all kind of agree on. Well, I guess we don't all agree on them, but we agree there should be some human rights. And the United Nations developed a set of 30 universal rights that ought to be enforced if they could be. And the civil rights are the way you do enforce it. There have to be laws and ways of doing that. And the middle one is then what happened after the Civil Rights Act that started the ball rolling, and we got more rights. We got the Voting Rights Act, not just easily. It took a lot of extra activism and suffering to get there, and the Fair Housing Act of '68. And these ones on green on the side, I'm just going to tell you what they are. I know you can't read them from here, but it also started things like Loving versus Virginia, which overturned the banning of interracial marriage. And then in 1973, we got Roe versus Wade. So we got more laws that enforce human rights. In 2015, we expanded marriage to include gay marriage. And on the right, you see where we have chipped away at what we were gaining. So Citizens United started to put money and on this thumb on the scale of elections, and still we're suffering with that. We overturned Roe versus Wade, well, I won't go through all these because this is only an hour. But anyway, those were some things that happened afterward. People may not know what the actual wording of the Civil Rights Act is, so that's what the third one says. But remember some of these slides for a second. So I'll go back to this one. So this little image here of the Black man with what looks like dreadlocks, but when you see it close up, is a beautiful metaphor for slavery. And a friend of mine, Chaz Maviani Davies, is an internationally known poster designer, and he was commissioned by the United Nations to interpret all of these rights. And I just love this particular one. It was so powerful. And the one you saw in the middle back there, you might have not known that it was a couple of people that you might know from First Pres Church who were the hand models for this. And that's some of the fun I have, is getting involvement from people in both their storytelling and just their helping with the graphics. The other three things I thought were important were to show the ceiling breakers, the people that were arts and poetry and journalism and sports and songwriting and singing and dance, and even graphic novels. So the top one there is Tai Nehisi Coates, who's a graphic novelist, and I had help picking him out by the WVU officers of the NAACP. The one in the middle is directly trying to address the millennials and Gen Z and their importance in this election and all of the elections. But and it also has information on how to register and how to fact check and those kinds of things. And the one on the right is the leaders that were in the freedom movement we call the Civil Rights Movement. And Ella Baker is the largest one in the background. And pay attention to the detail in this picture of John R. Lewis, because one of the other great things that was fun is being able to connect with people who would give me the rights to use their art. And Rebecca Hale of National Geographic let me use this photograph to use in the exhibit, because she agreed with what I was trying to do. And that saved me like $500. We didn't have a budget to do things like pay for those. Oops. Sorry. Okay. Now my button's screwing up again. Okay. So the dancer you saw in the Black Arts Movement one is Desmond Richardson. And this photograph is from 1960, but it's from the Alvin Ailey Dance Theater. And I always thought they were a wonderful group. They're still going, and they're still performing Revelations, which is what he's performing in that one. And I didn't point her out, but Rita Moreno was in that Black Arts Movement panel also. And she's known for West Side Story, one of the lead actors in that. And they're making a redo of West Side Story, and she's going to be in it again 50 years later at age 92 as a different character in it. So this is what they look like when they're in display places. The first one is, actually, that's the new one coming up. It's going to go in there tomorrow at the Vandalia Lounge in the mountain there. But sometimes it's set up in these triangular kiosks, and sometimes it's, I guess all these are kiosks in this situation. So these are outdoor. Sometimes I've built a platform when I'm outside to keep it out of the water, which it needed to be at Multifest. And then on the top right, you see it in just separate panels that were all just staggered around the room. And that's the Kelly Miller Community Center. And then sometimes when we're where there are people who are in the stories of the graphic novel, they've been invited to come talk at an opening. If this one was at the Morgantown Library again, Dana Pratt. And this was at Multifest in Charleston. And there weren't a whole lot of people at Multifest that wanted to stop and read, but the ones that did made up for all the ones that didn't stop. And this was a really amazing talk we had with Doug Marr, who's originally from South Charleston, but he's now the director of the Georgia Justice Project. And he and Joan talked about people in the freedom movement they both knew. And he's in Georgia now defending people with restorative justice, and such an amazing person. And we also had a big talk about he's Lebanese, and this was right. Well, I guess we're still in the place where Lebanon is at risk of being dragged into the Middle East, Gaza war, and he has relatives there. So this stuff is all real. So far we've traveled this pretty far, and it's scheduled after Diversity Week to go to Charleston again at the First Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King has spoke at one point in his life. Then it goes to Marshall University, and then Wheeling Public Library, and Joan and I are still trying to work Lewisburg out. Besides the exhibit, there's this other event that can go along with it. It's only happened once, but it's going to happen again at the Wheeling venue when it's there, and maybe at Marshall. And I'm going to go faster. So the third thing that I thought would be an important thing to connect to younger people would be the graphic novel. And there were so many West Virginian stories that I already had heard about that connected us to the Civil Rights Act and movement. And I really thought that there probably aren't that many people that know we are, and maybe young people don't think it even matters. It's just a national thing that goes elsewhere. So when I read comic books last, they looked like this. They were in color. They had this particular kind of shading. And I knew that graphic novels were kind of different now, so I had to check out what that meant. And so I collected some graphic novels, and they're really pretty cool. There is a whole genre that are just nonfiction graphic novels. And so it takes the most fun parts of the comic books, and they've gotten more creative than they were because it's more for an adult audience as well. The four you see on the bottom are the trilogy, the 3 books of March that are about John R. Lewis, and the one on the right is the container for the 3. And the first one came out in 2013, and the last one came out just shortly before he died. But they're really interesting inside now. And I just left the CAC an hour ago, where the artist for the March trilogy was giving a lecture. And he really reinforced that we had a good idea here when he said comics are an empathy machine. They drop you off in someone else's shoes. How's that? This is one, you guys know George Takei, who was Sulu on Star Trek. Well, he had another story in him. He was, you may or may not know that his family was interned in the was in the Japanese internment camps in World War II. And so this is the graphic novel that tells that story. And what I was looking for is what's changed. So they're black and white now in a way that I think black and white photographs somehow grab your attention more because they're unusual and they feel like more of an art form. When Nate Powell was just talking, he said they're also very cheap, and that's why it's the way to do them. Another artist that's doing graphic novels right now is Nora Krug, who does these historical ones like I'm trying to do. And I noticed that there's people are tolerating a lot more writing in them than they did in the comic book ones of my era. And I also noticed that sometimes she mixes illustration in with photographs. And I thought, well, there's kind of a cool thing to do. And then there aren't just in cells anymore. The background can be solid and bleed to the edges. And these are two slides from, or two shots of spreads in the March book. And they're also black and white. And you can see in the right-hand side here that it has a big interruption of a page that's like almost all black and solid and without the same kind of dialogue. And there's more white space than there used to be. So that was all very exciting to me, trying to figure out what I was going to do. So from here, the rest of it's going to be about the book as long as I can hold your attention. And what you see on the left is the current cover of the book. And we're so close to printing, so it might stay there. And on the right, you see the chapter version that a lot of you have seen in the museum, and that, I mean, in the library here. And that was a way of letting more people see them. And that required that they each had to have a cover for the chapter. And so now I'm trying to figure out if I've got it balanced right when they're back in a single volume. The one that's on the left will be a perfect bound book and all in one. So these are some of the wonderful people that I got to meet as I was getting their stories. So we have people, the girl in the bottom here is Sierra Velez, and she's 20. You can see this is what she looked like in the book. And Miss Sarah Little, I think a lot of you know about. She's 100. And I don't know, I didn't ask Ron English how old he is, but he's got experience being just a few years younger than Martin Luther King. So, and Janie Claytor Woodson, you'll see later. But I wanted you to get a look at what they look like in color, because then you won't see that anymore. So they're divided into chapters. I had to like figure out how to just get their stories individually and then sort of gather them in ways that made sense. And so that took a while to figure out. But the first chapter only has two people in it, Al Anderson and Dwayne Nichols. And of course, Al's black and Dwayne's white. But how their lives saw experiences of civil rights from both sides was a very interesting comparison, I thought. And chapter 2 has people like Joan who were really heavily involved right in the freedom movement, or they were close to it. And she and Winston Fuller were both freedom riders. And then chapter 3 covers the civil rights for people who aren't just black and white, but other kinds of groups that need rights that aren't getting them. And chapter 4 is a set of stories that had people help them through either struggles or advancement to get what they deserved. And so that's how that goes. And now we'll start to look at them. And you know all these members of our team. So it's been tremendous fun working with Barb Howe. And I wanted to make sure, I was so happy she would help me because I wanted to make sure we had everything exactly correct. And it was funny that after we were done with that, she said, well, we're going to go to Popular because Ray Jean's even more particular than I am. So that's where the book is right now. It's in Ray Jean's hands. And then Joan and Dawn have been really helpful. Joan has like given me lots of names of people that are news stories I didn't know about. And so she's been great for the research part. And she's also taken on doing the index. And Don Spencer helped with the research and his own amazing story. And so there's Popular. So that's how we're trying to make sure there's no mistakes in it. And then it's going to be printed at West Virginia State University, the HBCU, so that it will also, it just makes sense to do that. So now and then you'll see a panel, if it works out, from the exhibit, because it will be separated from the book after that. And I wanted to make sure there's the national story also thought about. So this chapter had civil rights for our generation when it was talking about, these were the NAACP, WVU, the WVU NAACP officers that were helping advise me. And I asked them first, you know, is this the right thing to do? And they were really enthusiastic in saying that, yeah, the graphic novel, we'll get that there. And so these are the girls back in color again. Soraya Boggs is from Spencer, West Virginia. Sierra Velez is from Charlestown in the Eastern Panhandle. And Dana Pratt is from the Bahamas. And she's the only one that graduated. She was the president of the group, and she's now in Alabama. Just to show you a little bit about how I worked with this. So all my drawings look like the one on the left when I first do them. And usually I'll draw in the hair, but in this particular series, I was talking about the Crown Act, and I wanted to identify exactly the differences between the kinds of hair people were styling, because we were trying to make the Crown Act pass, which will permit any kind of style that feels culturally appropriate to them. And so basically I drew it, and after I finish a drawing, I'll scan it, and then I'll enhance the contrast, and I'll take away any mistakes or make parts darker or lighter. I always make sure the teeth are just really white, and the whites of the eyes are really white, so everybody looks, and I give them highlights so they look, I hopefully, as beautiful as they can look. And so you can see what I did here, or I haven't told you what I'm doing here, but the hair was so particular that I photographed these people, and then I drew the drawing with, I first started with an outline tracing their stance, how they were. And then in Photoshop, I pasted their hair back in to the place on the drawing so that it would be exactly right for that particular kind of thing. So I took advantage of Photoshop in being able to mix photography and drawing sometimes. And so here's how it looked in the lower left-hand corner. I hadn't added the tones yet to everything, but I have layers in Photoshop where I can make the clothing have a different tone, just different gray tone, darker light, and then I can add highlights. So there might be like 5 or 6 layers in these illustrations. And so what we were trying to do with this one is show with the Crown Act that people have invested a lot of time and money in getting their hair to work. These sister locks that Sierra's mother's wearing take a lot of money to maintain. And the first time you sit there, you might sit there for 18 hours straight. So if you just are telling someone to go home and change their hair because you don't like it, that's pretty egregious. And so usually when I get someone's story, like this is Al's story from this first swirl down to the last one. I'm trying to figure out what makes their story hang together. And in this particular case, I put him as the first story because he happened to be in every kind of situation that just seemed like opposites. It was he was around integration and segregation, and he was in a place where he felt lower on the totem pole, and then he got some fame, and he learned from all of these situations, and he worked real hard, and he got some rewards, and he was in places when things happened, just coincidentally. And so that's what all these swirls are about. They're talking about times when I've seen civil rights cycle. So this is an example, the first of it. So one place he was in the right place at the right time was when he was happened to be working in Washington, D.C. when the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom happened. And he also happened to meet Roberta Flack while they were both playing music there in DC. But before that, he started out in Osage, and to make money, he worked in Morgantown. So Morgantown was segregated. Scotts Run was not, as most of you know who are listening to this. And this is a pretty famous photo from the Library of Congress that shows these kids sitting together in front of a truck. And the middle person, Robert Turner, they know, but they don't know the other white guys there. So by 1955, he skipped his last year of school and joined the Army, and he was down in the in training in South Carolina. Went to a bar where he heard a black band playing, and then got run right out of there. So in very quick order, he learned that he wasn't in Osage anymore, or even Morgantown. So he also was in Osage when the black football players that first arrived at WVU didn't have any place to eat. And so they would come out to Osage and have lunch, or sometimes they stayed with people there. And then I think you've probably all heard Al's story about the sheriff calling him, and he wasn't home, but he thought he was gonna be in trouble, but he was really being invited to be the singer in a band of the sheriff's son that was in. So that was a time when things really changed for him, and that's what put him in California when he did his famous song. So I put a little bit of history in among Al's story too, just to keep this is a little bit of a synopsis of the whole freedom movement in terms of a timeline at the same time. So we're up to where he was at the speech, the I Have a Dream speech, and then immediately almost Kennedy was assassinated, and that triggered the Civil Rights Act. And then he was in California recording, and he found that prejudice happens not just from black to white, but from urban to rural. So he was in this bar after he'd been recording in a studio, and then wanted to sing, and the people laughed at him because he was from West Virginia, until he started singing. So he talks about you always have to keep proving yourself. He was also there in California when the Watts riot happened, and then he's back in Washington and doing music for bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs. And the first time he did that, they again didn't want him until they heard him sing. So prove yourself all the time. And then after that, he comes back to Morgantown, lives in Osage, runs the shoe repair shop, and also does things like getting the sewage treatment for the Scotts Run area that didn't have it yet, and did that by going right to the governor and getting $1 million grant that turned into 16 million. Now he's doing a podcast. And in that same chapter, Dwayne Nichols gave us his story, which was recorded on video. And I watched that video a lot. And then I talked with Dwayne over the phone, and so that we could get his story there. And that's his daughter, Tracy, who's now doing the signing for him. But among the things in his story were these experiences with Black people that really inspired him. One was also a friend of Joan's, that was Hank Thomas. And when he was in graduate school, which I love because the college students will see that you can be in college and do stuff right then. But he was trying to integrate the part of so this part's in DC. He was in the University of Delaware, but he traveled down with Hank Thomas to try and integrate this amusement park. And Hank had come up because he had heard, I guess, through SNCC that they were doing such a good job trying to integrate restaurants and things up in Delaware that he came up and helped him. And so, and Hank you'll see him more in this book, but I'll stop there for that. But George Wilson was another person that he met when he was up there doing those things. And George Wilson was this guy who was a construction guy, but he would demolish places that were in need of it and then take those materials and build houses. And he ended up building, like, I think it's in here, I think it's 50-some houses, 51 houses. And during that process, though, he was still, he was the first Black city councilman in that town in Newark. And he was still unable to sometimes be served himself. And so one time he was at this particular bar, and they were trying to not serve him, and he knew about the group that was at the University of Delaware with Dwayne, and he called them, and they came over and sat there until they were finally served, and they changed their policy there. So in Charleston, Ron English is well known, and he's been part of the West Virginia Coalition for Truth in History and probably dismantling racism sometime or another. But he was a reverend at the First Baptist Church, which is a really well-known one. And when they first called him, they called him because he had a recommendation from Martin Luther King's father. And then he also had a recommendation, or he also was interviewed, I think, by Lucia James, who was just spoken about before the meeting. And so they knew Ron English because his family had grown up with Martin Luther King's family. And in fact, Martin Luther King, as I said, was just a few years older than him. And he was coming back from college when Ron was in the youth group. And he said, one of the things you probably don't know about Martin Luther King is that he could play piano and sing. And so that was part of his story. But another part of Ron's story was this really interesting contrast between when he was living in Georgia and he was pulled over by the police, and he knew that there was nothing he could do to stop whatever they wanted to do. And you could see in this little dialogue, "Officer, why'd you pull me over?" And then N-word, "I don't need a reason to pull you over." And he said he put him in jail anyway, even without, maybe for daring to ask why he was pulled over. But then he had a different experience when he was in West Virginia, when he drove his family to New York and almost ran out of gas on his way home, forgot to fill up in Pittsburgh, and it was late. And so he stopped at a state police pull off and thought he would just, try to not be seen. And then, but it was a different experience. The officer came over, asked him how he could help him, and he explained his gas situation. And the officer said, "Well, here's what I can do. I know Earl, who owns the station at the next exit, and I can call him and tell him to open up early and that you are coming, and I can escort you there." And he did all these things. So some of these stories are ones that you don't expect to come out in ways that West Virginia looks good, but they do. And this time they're not. So Ron got there at the time when the Triangle District was being dismantled to put in the interstate. And this is another place where I put a real picture in with the drawing because I wanted you to be able to read the signs and those kinds of things. Ron was also there for the famous Alice Moore textbook controversy, which we're into now with these banning of books things. And another opportunity Ron had was being part of this restorative justice group that got to go to South Africa and meet Nelson Mandela almost as soon as he was out of prison, and Desmond Tutu. So that was worth putting in this book to show people. It's just wonderful how people were connected. So Joan has a lot of pages, but I'm going to show you just a few of them. And she's the freedom rider that we thought was the only one in West Virginia. Turns out there was another one. And I wanted to put in the rules because people probably don't understand what the nonviolence thing meant. And so these sets of rules tell you exactly how to behave, in order to stir up the least controversy. And Mahatma Gandhi was one person that had influenced this nonviolent idea. And James Lawson was a person who brought it back. And Bayard Rustin also visited there and brought it back. He was the Quaker and the actual organizer of the March on Washington, and had even tried it before in the 1940s. So I don't know if you're trying to read faster than I am or not, but so Joan was telling all these stories. And then on the right side, you're seeing Hank Thomas again, and Hank and Joan had the similar background of having been on sharecropper cotton field farms. So Joan, I'm probably messing this up, but Hank never wanted to do that again, and he never had to be, but he was part of the freedom movement, and he's the famous first person you see at the forefront of that picture of the burned bus when one of the first freedom rides were attacked so savagely. And so they also, I don't know if people realize that they were put in one of the most heinous prisons in the US. But even on death row, though they weren't planning to be killed, but they were there for a while. So this is the story of Joan's freedom ride on the train to Albany and who she's with. And she said that another influence besides Gandhi was Walden and the treatise on the duty of civil disobedience that was part of Thoreau's work. And on the right, you see that the other freedom rider was Winston Fuller. So Joan went to Albany, and Winston Fuller went to Jackson, Mississippi. And he was also put in that same jail that Hank Thomas was in, but he was just there at Parchman Penitentiary. He was just there for 3 weeks. Then we turn to the idea that the Black community has served in every war, and they've come back, and it's made no difference in terms of their respect. And one of the people telling this story was Mariah Gaddis, and her father was 96 when he was first recognized as having had an important role in our history as being a Tuskegee Airman. But when he first came back, he wasn't even able to get a job as a mechanic, though he'd been a mechanic on these airplanes. And some of you got to see Rita Marks if you didn't know her at the library, but her story, she forgot to tell the part that was my favorite when she was talking. But her story starts, one of the reasons I wanted to do her is because I knew that for decades she had been keeping an apartment in her basement for students that wanted to go to WVU and had no money. And so they got free housing and free utilities. And I think she's on her 44th one. In fact, one of them is in our choir right now. But she knew about Black people because of a legend. I guess it wasn't a legend because it was her father's story. But her father, when he was just out of high school, had a experience where he was crushed in the mines. Both his legs were crushed, one below the knee, one above. And he was about to bleed to death. They couldn't find any tourniquets, the people that were around there. So they rushed him out in this is 1916. So they rushed him out in this car. And the first place they came to was a Black family's house. And they ran out and put tourniquets on, and he went on to Grafton Hospital and saved his life. So what she knows about Black people is that they saved his life. Her life, yeah. And this was her father, who had wooden legs after that, and was clever enough that he created this single stroke engine that would let him maneuver around. And she said he would hook the cow's horns, or the Dorset sheep's horns when he was trying to work with them. And that's Rita as a young person. And where did she decide to do this business about having hospitality and letting people stay in her house? And this story is about when she got one of her first teaching jobs was in New Jersey, and it was at a Black high school. And she drove up and found herself an apartment and didn't realize it was in the prostitution district. So without telling her, students would walk her home every day. And she said it didn't take her too long to figure out they were doing it to protect her. So that was one good experience. And then people that she met while she was up there, a couple of them got married and were going to get buy a duplex house. And she was ready to get out of that apartment. And besides, her landlady had told her, when she invited the Black art teacher to dinner, never to do that again. So she went to the house with them. And this was the time at which the Black leaders of new African countries were coming to the UN to get advice and join. And it was still a segregated time, so they could not get hotels in the area. And Bev England and her husband, Wally Williams, invited them to stay at their house. And so this is a picture of them having a barbecue in the backyard and making like it was not 1960. So the reason they were so ready to be hospitable was because Bev's father and mother were missionaries in Burma, and not the proselytizing kind of missionary, the kind that were doing human rights efforts for the people there. And when he died, in fact, Dr. Albert Blackwell, the bigger quote down here, said, "We called him Johnny Appleseed for the peace movement. He approached everyone as a child of God. Race was no barrier, nor was nationality, nor was religion, nor was the lack of religion." And so it reminded me of what we try to do at our church. I thought I'd give you a little fun with my experience with AI. Sometimes I wanted to have a background in the right time period and the right kind of clothing. So sometimes I could just look online for it. Other times I asked AI to see what they would give me. And so they generated this picture of this Burmese couple over here. And so I stuck them in there, and then I found the right kind of cow. But I put the heads on from the people that were in the book title. So it's often was a really mishmash of things till I get it done for drawing. And a funny thing often happens. And here I told AI I wanted a picture of a Black man in 1860 pulling a wagon with a horse. And this is literally, it would not put the cart behind the horse. It put the the cart before the horse. And then if you look closely at the hooves down there, the hooves are facing toward me, even though I'm seeing the tail of the horse. So you never know what you'll get with that. Sometimes it's pretty funny, but it ended up being useful for me to know what kind of jacket he might have worn. And so the reason the Burmese missionaries were so hospitable was their grandfather was saved during the Civil War by a slave, an enslaved Black man who rescued this Confederate soldier left for dead and nursed him back to health till he could go back home. And so he told his progeny that you never, ever mistreat a Black man, and you do what you can to help. And then I'm going to skip to the next one here. The Green Book is another fascinating story, I think. This is the tail end of one story where Sierra there is talking about what her grandparents looked like. This is part of the Crown Act story, but she said that her grandfather had to drive from Florida to Charlestown using the Green Book so that he could stay in places that were safe. And Carolyn Bailey Lewis was originally born in Pittsburgh, but she was brought to Bluefield by her great aunt when they couldn't, her parents couldn't take care of her. And so she grew up in Hotel Thelma, which was one of the places on the Green Book in Bluefield. And that was also on the Chitlin circuit. So Black performers could stay there. And so she got to meet people like Ike and Tina Turner and James Brown. She got to dance with James Brown. And when she was 12 years old, her parents decided they wanted her now, and they were now in El Paso, Texas. So Mama Thelma packed up all her things. They got in the car and they got their Green Book, and they decided they would travel to El Paso, Texas. And they were able to get food in grocery stores and things because Mama Thelma could pass for white, but her daughter could not. So she had to bend down in the car and not be seen when they would need to get groceries. But the Green Book worked, and they got there, and when they were there a week, Carolyn decided she did not want to go back. I mean, she did not want to stay. She wanted to go back and have Mama Thelma be her mother. And Mama Thelma was so thrilled that she drove on them all the way to Disneyland to celebrate. And so their trip with the Green Book was 5,000 miles. I'm going to go faster, so I'll skip this. But these are some of the people that were on the Chitlin circuit that stayed there. Oh, I'm going backwards. Okay. So Charlene Marshall's story starts out, you may or may not know that she lost her father in a mining accident when she was just 6 years old. And then it wasn't long after that, her mother remarried and she lost her stepfather in a mining accident. But this chapter is about how allies, before the term allies was there, they were white people quietly helping folks work around the system. And Charlene had a lot of those instances. So she was born in Scotts Run, and I put this mural that's out there about the 23 countries that contributed to that population, which is why they were integrated. They were all poor, along with the Blacks that migrated from the South. But she did everything with a whole lot of hard work. She started working at 12 and pretty much stayed in Morgantown during the weekdays and got to go home on the weekends because she had so many jobs. So some of these jobs were, she said that white families were called from, would call Monongalia High to see if Black ladies wanted a job. So she worked for the Darings, taking care of their twins, the Browns, a Greek family, the Wade sisters, a flower shop, all kinds of places, Batless Apartments. But this is a picture of her with the twins, who were just 4 years old at the time. And then after she was married, she was trying to integrate Morgantown's restaurants, and they had a little scheme going where they teamed up with Jean Loudon and Joy Berkeley, who are WVU professors, and Sophie and Virgil Peterson, who you guys know, I believe most of you do. And two of them went in and or the two couples went in and tried to get seated. And then they asked if they could be members. Charlene asked if they could be members, and they were told there weren't any more memberships available, but they knew that would happen. And so they had Sophie and Virgil ready to come by and ask if they could join later. And then, of course, they had suddenly memberships. And then Charlene had already written this letter to the Human Rights Commission, already notarized, ready to mail if it happened the way they thought it would. And they eventually got the flame to let people in that way. When she worked at Sterling Fawcett, these three people protected her and took her in, and she remains friends with them till she's outlived them all, but till they died. And so she talked about that kind of friendship, and one of them wanted to bowl, and she wanted to bowl, so she wanted to integrate bowling. So she, at Suburban Lanes, there was one black team that she joined, and another white team dropped out because they joined, but then she helped form another black team. And then after that, I'm not going to have time to read so much, so I'm going to just skip this. But there's some fun parts of this story where she ended up being on an international stage convention center in Denver, where they were having their bowling convention, and white women helped her be the person who carried the flag for West Virginia on the stage, which made other black women in the audience cry because they never thought they'd see that. But stories like this are happening throughout the book. You guys probably know about Charlene's story of having had to sit in the balcony of the Met Theater when she was a kid, and being able, as mayor, to sit in the to sign the check for buying the theater given to Gus Kamunsi. So now that it was full circle. So many stories about people helping that are really fun. And I see it's getting near 8, so I'm just gonna see if there's anything else I should stop and tell you about. So many fun stories. And there is a section on LGBT. So Rosemary Ketchum has a section, and Reverend Dr. Polly Murray, who I didn't know about till Joan told me, who's on a quarter. And I got to put my own student in there who's helped Virginia ratify the ERA, if they'll just pass it. And Crystal Goods got some really fun parts in her story. And this is Janie Claytor Woodson, who is Carter Woodson's related to her husband. These are amazing stories. This Elizabeth Hardin Gilmore, they're heroes in the Charleston area. And Mary Crozier Snow, who now has a school named after her. They were both the Girl Scout leaders of Janie, and they integrated hospitals and well, not the whole hospital. They integrated the candy stripers in the hospital and a Girl Scout troop. And we're just here at the end now, but one of Janie's stories is that she came to WVU in 1969, and there were very few black people there. They all knew each other, the few that were there. And she started she was one of these 4 people that started the Black Student Union. And so she's the one who's right here. And so when we were carting this book around and at the Multifest, this guy, Ron Wilkerson, accidentally runs into us and finds that he wasn't even planning to stop and talk to anybody. He was just walking through there, And I happened to see his Tai Chi emblem on his shirt. And so I said, do you teach Tai Chi? I just thought maybe he would. And he has taught Tai Chi for 50 years. And a friend of mine teaches Tai Chi here. And so we started a little conversation. And then he came over to see what we were about. And then he flips through this book and he sees his own picture there. I didn't know it was him. He hadn't said that and I didn't recognize the name. So that's the kind of fun that happens with this, because then as soon as that happened, he's then sitting talking with us for probably an hour and a half. And people he knows go by because he's from the area, and he grabs them all over and tells us his story, what just happened, because he felt like it was a miracle. So that's it. And I know it's close to time to stop. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if you're still awake.
Well, thank
And
you.
if you
Thank
have any
you, Eve.
questions.
Thank you, Eve. That was a great run through of so many of the products, or what you have done most recently, and obviously the skills that you have in graphic design show through. But behind all of that is that passion that you have. And while others are forming their questions, could I ask you, maybe, where does that come from? Your passion for social justice?
It depends on how deep you want to go.
It's your
A
story.
lot of people have stories of their own, that are what made them first start looking for people who need help. And I have one of those. I mean, I had a childhood that was pretty seriously crummy. And I have a suspicion about people that are too quiet, and I try to pay attention and see what's going on. And I think that has led me, and I think my field does that too. We're always interpreters, we're trying to get someone's message so that other people can hear it. And I think I got really passionate about it when I just got mature enough, to know what to do with with myself, and to see that my field had a place in that. And so that's why we had that class I taught for the last like 10 or more years on design for social impact. And we took on people that we could help in that way. And Scott's Run was a big, one of their, was always there, because once we had started a relationship with them, they trusted us. So they'd let us experiment with different things. And I hope that planted some seeds that would, if they didn't stay in design, it'll do something for their life. But anyway, it's hopeful. It's a way to do something, as we heard in Michelle Obama's speech, you can sit there and complain, or you can do something. So I guess that's part of it.
Thank you. Others have questions or comments for Eve?
Ron?
I see Ron.
When are you hoping that the book will be published, or the graphic novel will be published?
When you say?
Yes.
Momentarily. We're meeting with, actually, we don't get to meet with Barb until she gets back from a conference. But we're just crossing the T's at this point. I mean, Popular is they think they'll be finished with the proofing tomorrow. Although I did just get a call yesterday from Crystal Good that she wants her hair changed in 3 of the drawings. But it's really close. How close are we, Regine? I didn't see you on there.
Yeah. Don't make any promises, Eve.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think we
Yeah.
got another week before Barb gets in town anyway.
Yeah, she and I are meeting Monday. She gets back Monday, and we're going to meet Monday afternoon. Okay. Yeah. And she's going to come meet with you and
okay.
go
Do
through
whatever changes you found.
Yeah.
So we're that close.
Yeah, you're getting there. Eve, I have a technical question. Just all the illustrations. So
Mm.
were you working? I know you talked about how you integrated photographs in on some of them, but were you working from photographs? Like, all the different illustrations of Charlene Marshall, for example. Did
Yeah.
she pose some so you'd have a starting point for some of the
I took a lot of pictures of her, and I've had pictures of her from over the years, but some of the ones I would find somebody that I thought was in a pose I could use, and then I would just put her face on.
Okay.
Or sometimes I would use AI to give me some starting point. Most of the backgrounds, the one that I really used AI for was the background with Al at the telephone, the sheriff call, because
Mhm.
I didn't have time to like discover what every little thing would be in 1940, what they look like. So I asked AI to give me a shot of that, and then I would draw what I could from that. Mostly I would collage a lot of stuff together and
Mhm.
then go from there.
Yeah. Just, Eve, the question about when the book might be out there published.
Yeah.
So do you want to mention the two options for printing? Just that you will have it on demand.
Can
Also-
you describe that better than I can? Because
Okay.
you've done that before. You were suggesting it, yes.
Yeah. So, what is it? A couple hundred books will be printed.
600 will be free.
Okay, 600 will be printed all in one print run, but then the book will be uploaded to Amazon using KDP, which is an Amazon affiliate, so that anyone in the public can purchase the book. I don't think you've set a price yet, but those will be printed on demand. So as orders are received, they'll be printed and shipped out to people in whatever quantity, and that
And
could be purchased by individuals, museums, bookstores, and so forth, or by.
but then Barb is working on another grant from the West Virginia Humanities Council that they would give us maybe $2,000 to print another run.
Mhm.
And that we could control the price on. It wouldn't be giving Amazon any percentage back. So I think we're thinking that one will be $15.
Mhm.
What did we get from that? And then we're trying to get an ebook version, right?
Right.
And then there's some discussion about whether there's some teacher's resource that could upload them, and then maybe we can put them on the
TPT.
for Social Justice website. So we're going to try to get it out there accessible to people in different ways.
I just want to make a couple of points. One is this book overcomes the prejudice that we have always been as conservative as we are. When the Civil Rights Act came up for vote in Congress in 1964, we had 5 congresspeople and all 5 voted for it. And we had 2 senators and one of the senators voted for it. So that would surprise you if you look at our political landscape now. First of all, we only have 2 congressmen and they wouldn't vote for it. But the other thing that struck me was how connected we all are. And doing the index, I could see that. For example, Eve mentioned Route 40. We had 3 different stories that deal with Route 40 and the protests there and the new African country ambassadors having trouble getting public accommodations there. And we have 3 different people who worked on that. So there are all these kinds of connections through here. And we are not isolated. We had a young woman who grew up in the Bahamas is one of the stories. And we had people who were in Selma and at the March on Washington and are connected with things outside West Virginia. So we're not just some little country bumpkin, rural, isolated group of people. We're connected and we're all doing good stuff. I hope this inspires us all to feel better about ourselves.
I think that was something that was a pleasure to find that there are so many positive stories. There's heroes in a lot of these stories. It's not a negative book. But
Thank you, Joan, and thank you for your contribution to that story also. Are there, oh, okay, Margaret, I see.
I just wanted to say it's fantastic. And our grandson, who's 12, practically the only thing he'll read is graphic novels. I didn't even know what he was talking about when he started and he's a voracious reader, and he kept asking for graphic novels, and I didn't know what he was talking about. So I've had to learn about graphic novels, but I can't wait to be able to get a copy of your book to get to him, because I'm sure that he will enjoy
that'll be the final test.
Yeah, so it's fantastic. That's lots of hard work, and it's fantastic. So congratulations.
I just wanted to say that I work in the school system, and I want to echo Margaret's comments about the graphic novels being so attractive to our students. And I also can't wait to get some copies into my building so my students can utilize them for seeing how we fit in locally with this movement. So I think it's a great time, and I hope, I'm like Ron, I hope they come out really soon, because I'd like to get them in their hands, and they will definitely take advantage of the graphic novels.
Where are you?
I'm in Mon County Schools, and I work in the at the Excel Center, which is the alternative learning center for pre-K through 12. So I have students from across our county.
Thank you, Sherry.
We might be able to
Well,
slip you a copy.
Go ahead, Eve.
I would gladly accept it, Eve. Thank you so much.
Might have mistakes in it.
We're okay with that. We're all about progress, not perfection in our school.
Be sure to do it before it gets banned.
Exactly.
Well, thank you all very much for participating with us with Dismantling Racism Together tonight. And Eve, thank you very much for bringing us along your journey. And it certainly is, as I said, an extension of your creativity, but has its total basis in your passion. And we appreciate.
Well, it's been fun to share the passion with other passionate people, huh, Joan?
Amen. Amen to that. Yes. Our next meeting will be October 21st. So please be alert to our next meeting, and when the announcement comes out about our speaker, I hope to see you all then. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank
And
you.
have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Thank
Thank you, Eve.
Amazing.
Sherry, text me or find me somehow.